Revan is perhaps the greatest example of the mysteries that surround the Force. At one point, he was revered as a Jedi strong with the light side, and the next, his entire being splintered into a truly ruthless and brutal Sith Lord, exuding the dark side. Today we are going to open up the Jedi archives once more and uncover 10 facts about Darth Revan you may never have known. Starting with Revan and the son of Mortis. As we know, the son is the living embodiment of the dark side of the Force, located on the ethereal realm of Mortis. We first meet the son in the animated Clone Wars series when Anakin was nearly chosen to take control of the son and daughter, bringing balance to the realm. However, they weren't the only individuals that we were supposed to meet on Mortis. In the episode of Ghost of Mortis, it was originally planned that the son would confer with two ancient Sith at the will of the dark side. Those two Sith were Darth Bane and Darth Revan. Revan would solidify the son's resolve in the dark side, ensuring that he continues his pursuit of taking over Mortis and after the galaxy. Unfortunately, Dave Filoni decided to remove the scene because it insinuated that Revan was able to separate from the Force and manifest himself outside of it, which contradicted a lot of what George Lucas established about the Force. Lucas agreed and also decided that the Sith could not return as spirits. Though this would have been a great connection to explore, it doesn't come close to the connection that Revan has with Luke Skywalker, specifically in The Last Jedi. After the fall of Ben Solo and subsequently Luke's Jedi Order, Luke spent a lot of time delving and reflecting further on the history of Jedi. He took the refuge on the island Ahch-To, which is the location of the first Jedi Temple, and gathered a collection of ancient books, writing, and mementos over time. One of those mementos is a handmade pendant carrying a metal cradle with a red kyber crystal mounted inside. For some viewers, it may be assumed that it was Darth Vader's kyber crystal that Luke held on to over the years, but luckily for us, the visual dictionary for The Last Jedi specifically defined this pendant as a recovered Jedi Crusader pendant with a fragmented Sith lightsaber crystal. Now, the term Jedi Crusader may be vague, but there is only one individual who was given the title of Jedi Crusader in Star Wars history, and that individual is none other than Revan. Revan was given this title because of his devoted opposition against the Mandalorians during the Mandalorian Wars. Even when the Jedi Order ignored the growing threat, he preached revanchism, which is the reconquering of worlds and territories, hence the Jedi Crusader title, and circles back to how Luke is actually holding onto Revan's old Sith kyber crystal. Coincidentally, another one of Revan's items actually helped shape a philosophy that would drive the Sith for thousands of years. 1 year after the final battle of the Mandalorian Wars, Revan and Malak returned from the unknown regions as a Sith Lord. They had their minds infiltrated by the Sith Emperor and became willing servants, fully embracing the dark side and its values. The two were dispatched to go find star maps to locate the Starforge, an orbital factory that would be used by the Sith to create military supplies. During this mission, Darth Revan created his own Sith holocron and began recording his thoughts on the nature of the relationship between a Sith master and apprentice. He proposed that the Sith beliefs were flawed and that multiple Sith members of the Order would lead to its downfall. Eventually, Darth Revan and Malak would locate a star map in the Temple of the Ancients, and it was here that Revan left his holocron in the lowest level of the temple. Around 1032 BBY, Darth Bane came across this holocron. Already aligning to Revan's thoughts and seeing the weaknesses in the Sith, Bane devised a plan to wipe out the Sith and replace them with Revan's vision. His plans culminated in the Battle of Ruzan, where the Jedi wiped out the Sith and Bane was the sole survivor. He was finally able to start the Sith over and enacted the Rule of Two, which saw the Sith operate with only one master and one apprentice at any time. This went on for thousands of years before eventually coming to an end with the death of Darth Vader. But just as Revan reshaped the very core of Jedi and Sith frameworks, he also found himself breaking those same rules. When Darth Revan and Darth Malak boarded the Starforge, they inadvertently broke free from the Sith Emperor's control, but Revan's mind was still twisted to the dark side, so he declared himself the new leader of the Sith Empire, with Malak as his apprentice. Word got back to the Jedi, and they sent a Jedi strike team to try and capture Revan and Malak, led by Jedi Bastila Shan. Her team was able to board Revan's vessel and corner Revan on the deck bridge. However, before she could engage Revan in combat, Darth Malak unleashed a bombardment on Revan's vessel, having secretly broken away from the battle in an attempt to destroy both the Jedi strike team and Darth Revan so he could become the new Sith leader. Bastila survived the gunfire and was able to use the Force to stabilize Revan, who was near death. This created a Force bond between the two, and Bastila was able to get Revan back to the Jedi Council for help. They temporarily erased Revan's memory and retrained him in the ways of the Jedi to defeat Darth Malak, which he was able to do. Eventually, through this Force bond, Bastila fell in love with Revan, and they got married. The Jedi Order, knowing that Revan was a hero for defeating Malak, allowed them to keep their Jedi status and get married. but Revan was not able to discuss any of his Sith knowledge to anyone. Revan and Bastila would eventually have a son named Vaynor. Oddly enough, while being born from two very powerful Jedi, Vaynor was not Force sensitive. Instead, he went on to become a politician and eventually the Supreme Chancellor. Just like his son mastered the art of politics, Revan was a master in lightsaber combat, specifically Form 6, Niman. Niman was the last form to gain widespread acceptance in the Jedi Order, but quickly eclipsed the other forms in popularity, becoming the new standard for the Jedi. Niman blended the aspects of Forms 1 through 5, balancing the various qualities and purposefully avoiding many of the weaknesses within those forms. This flexibility worked in Revan's favor because he was able to implement whatever mixture of forms fit in the specific situation he was in. Revan could quickly adapt his fighting style towards more force-focused combat if necessary, while also switching back to traditional blade work as the fight progressed. Revan used Form 6 in his battles against Darth Malak, and its effects were brutal. On just their first encounter, Revan maimed Malak, severing his bottom jaw. From then on, Malak was forced to use a metal prosthesis over his lower face and spoke through a vocabulator for the rest of his life. But even being a master in both the Force and Niman, Revan was still unnerved at the devastation that he left behind him. So after the Mandalorian Wars, Revan created the infamous assassin droid HK-47 himself. If you played through Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, you'll remember HK and his rather bleak outlook on us meatbag humans. Revan constructed HK to carry out assassination missions of key political figures. While it was probably for efficiency, many argued that it was Revan's way of distancing himself from that violence, while still getting the mission done. And this line of thinking is why Revan is considered a master military tactician by almost every historian that covered him. While the Mandalorian Wars heated up and their clans expanded their territory at an alarming rate, Revan was the only Jedi speaking up against their acts. Eventually, after witnessing a Force vision of thousands of individuals slaughtered on Cathar for no reason, the Jedi allowed Revan access to a military unit that would be used to push back Mandalorian clans. Revan would find himself leading over 1/3 of the Republic Army fleet during this time. Winning countless battles and reconquering fallen territories, he focused on a long-term tactical fighting by targeting orbital shipyards that housed war materials and military supplies that the Mandalorian could scale with. He understood that the Republic's industrial might was their key to victory, but this wasn't without loss though. Revan's military tactics were sound, but his execution was rash. He focused on a victory at all cost attitude, which led him to giving up troops and territory to assure a decisive win across the board. It's been calculated that for every one Mandalorian death, there were 10 Republic troops that died under Revan's directive. However, that number will seem insignificant when compared to Revan's largest military initiative. Revan was responsible for the complete desolation of the Mandalorian. In 3960 BBY, Revan ordered the construction of a superweapon known as the Mass Shadow Generator, which created a massive gravity vortex that drew ships towards a neighboring planet, sending them flying into the surface. In an attempt to lure the Mandalorians into range of the Mass Shadow Generator, Revan launched an assault on Mandalore the Ultimate's flagship. Sensing that defeat was inevitable, Mandalore the Ultimate challenged Revan to single combat. Aboard Mandalore's ship, the two fought in a battle to the death, which eventually saw Revan overcome Mandalore. As a last act towards Mandalore the Ultimate, Revan took Mandalore's mask himself, which left the Mandalorian without a way to appoint a successor. After Revan's victory, the Republic forces continued to push the Mandalorians closer to Malachor V, and it was then that the Mass Shadow Generator was activated. Almost all of the Mandalorian and a large number of the Republic troops were swept into the vortex and shot towards the surface of Malachor V. Countless ships were slammed into the surface of Malachor V, crushing them and fracturing the planet to its core. Thousands upon thousands died, and the surviving Mandalorian transmitted their unconditional surrender to the Republic sources soon after. In a weird turn of events, Revan walked out of that as a war hero, even with thousands of deaths on his hands. But even more insane was what happened when Revan was captured by the Sith Emperor Vitiate. While searching for the information about his old life before his memory was wiped, Revan found himself up against the Sith Emperor on the planet Nathema. While Revan put up a good fight, he was no match against Vitiate and was taken prisoner. For over 300 years, Revan was tortured and interrogated by Vitiate for knowledge of the Republic and the Force. Vitiate even linked his mind to Revan so he could use him as a conduit to the Force. Through the centuries of mental torture, Revan's mind eventually fractured and was forced to separate to deal with the pain. One half of Revan focused solely on the Force to ease the pain, but his other half experienced the full brunt of the torture, build absolute rage and hatred towards Vitiate. The fracturing of Revan is what ultimately makes him one of the most powerful Force users across both the Jedi and the Sith. Not only did Revan fully understand both the light and the dark side of the Force, but he was so powerful that both of those sides coexisted at the same time. After Revan was freed, he established a military to defeat the Emperor and his empire using the Foundry, a Rakatan space station. However, the Empire found out about Revan's plans and was able to sneak an Imperial strike team on board the Foundry to kill Revan. Revan dueled 4 strike team members before ultimately being defeated. However, he was able to vanish in a flash of violet energy to safety. As he died, Revan attempted to become one of the Force, but while one side joined the Force, the other part that embraced the darkness to escape the pain of torture refused to do so and was left to control his body, fully submerged in the dark side.